Hi everyone, Jessica from ogling.com here. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on my videos. I'd really appreciate that. In this video, I am going to show you how I turned my 4-seater dining table into a 2-seater dining table. Now some of you might ask, why would I make a 4-seater dining table any smaller? Simple, it's just me and my husband, and we live in a small apartment, so the space that we have is very limited. We bought a 4-seater dining table for either $40 to $50. I can't remember, it was like over a year ago. And we put it in the space. We used it for about 10 months as is. Now it fit in the space, but it was really awkward to get in. So I just decided, you know what? I'm going to chop this up. I am going to cut out the center. I'm going to keep the legs, and I'm going to make it into a 2-seater dining table so that we have room to sit down. We can get to our seats and be comfortable. And it was a very frustrating project. That was the first time I kind of went after something without like a tutorial to go off of, and I just hope you enjoy it. I really want you guys to just like stop imagining a better space and just start creating it. And that's what I'm like slowly doing through my apartment, is just trying to create a better space that's more functional and just happy to be in. So here's the video, and when you pull out that chair, you're pretty much up against the stove when you're sitting on it, so that 11.5 inches I ended up cutting out the center of the table really comes in handy. Well, my table actually has a flat part on there, and then it starts to curve off the edge. So I'm measuring only from the flat part. Now I'm going to grab a 10.5 inch plate, place it on there. I'm also going to grab 2 glasses, a water glass, wine glass, in case I ever wanted a formal setup. I need to make sure I have enough room for that. So measuring from the flat part, mine is about 16.5 distance, where everything is going to fit on there. Nothing's going to feel like it's falling off. And that's what you really want. You don't want your plates to feel like they're about to fall off. Now remove the plate and glasses. Now you have to mark the center of the table. So you need to find the distance, which mine was 28. I marked at the 14. I already have it done. You can see it right there. Now you need 16.5 inches to remain on your table. So you need to figure out how much you need to cut out of your table. So you just subtract 16.5 from 28, which is the whole distance, and that'll give you 11.5 inches. So you need to cut out 11.5 inches. If you're not good at math, here's a little trick. If you get a measuring tape and put the end of the measuring tape at your distance, mine was 28, then you're going to pinch at the 16.5 mark, because that's how much you need left on your table. It will tell you how much you need to cut out of your table. So if you pinch at the 16.5, you get 11.5 inches. You need to cut out 11.5 inches. To center that on the table, I divide 11.5 by 2, and that's going to give me 5 3/4 of an inch. So you want to mark on both sides of that 14-inch center mark that you've already marked. You're going to mark 5 3/4 of an inch on each side. So if you add that up, that's 11.5 inches you're going to be cutting out. Once you make your marks, you're going to extend your lines through the whole length of the table. You're going to write cut out on the center. I always do that in case I step away or forget what I'm doing. And you just extend it, and that's what you're going to cut. Okay, so you're going to have to borrow a saw, or if you have one, sweet. You need some protective eyewear, and you need some helping hands. Bare fingers. So now what you're going to do is just follow your line that you've just created with the saw. I did about halfway, and then I went on the other side and did the other half. Now this table had that little lip that kept it together, which was pretty great. Yes, I know we're not really wearing the proper protective stuff, but the weather was horrible outside and I wanted to get this video done. So to cut the lip, I just hand sawed it. You're going to end up with 2 pieces like this. You want to sand your entire project, including the legs. I started with an 80 grit sandpaper, and then I went to a 120 grit sandpaper. Now using your measuring tape, you want to make marks. I made about 5 marks, and then you make sure you center it on both sides of the table. I'm using Madison Mill ink dowel pins, 3/8 diameter by 2 inches long. These ridges here, the glue's going to catch. We're going to drill holes right now where you made those marks on the table, and we're going to put this dowel halfway in, and the glue's going to catch in those little ridges. A drill bit set like this, you are going to have a 3/8 inch bits, but however I'm going to use a 5/8 inch bit. I did make a mistake on using this, but I will show you in a later clip how I corrected it. Since I don't have my table secure in any way, I am going to grab a much smaller bit as my pilot hole, and it's just going to serve as a guide for my 5/8 bit when I'm drilling. So I'm doing the pilot hole right now with the smaller bit. You do want to make sure you get exactly on that X in the center, because you need it to line up with the other half of your table, and you're going to do the same measurements on the other half of your table, so you want everything to be lined up correctly. So half of the dowel pin needs to be on this half of the table, and the other needs to be on the other half of the table. So a way to prevent you from drilling too far is I grab painter's tape and I wrap it around my drill bit the distance that I need to stop. So I know that once I start drilling and I hit the tape, I just reverse, and the same thing, everything will be even, and you can do it for all the holes that you've already pre-drilled. This is actually a tip that my dad taught me. Thanks, Dad. So now for my mistake. You see that dowel right there made like a bow on the table? Way to prevent that is when I'm drilling, I'm going to move the drill around. And I'm still using that 5/8 bit. And you see that I'm not actually moving around a lot. It just needs a little bit. Remove all dust, and then you're going to fill the drilled holes with Gorilla wood glue about 1/4 of the way, then tap it in with a rubber hammer. I didn't have one. And then use a wet damp cloth to take off the excess glue. Okay, this is the part where I actually messed up and I didn't record it for you. It was the second half of that table where you had to mark the X's on there. I was really rushed and I didn't take my time. First rule of like any carpentry is like measure twice, cut once. So I definitely suggest measuring like twice, 3 times, make sure they're all aligned. So when they met up, I got lucky and half of it met up perfectly. The other half, there was a gap, which was bound to happen because I wasn't using the proper tools, I didn't have a secure, and I'm not a carpenter, so I figured that was gonna happen, but there was a gap, and then it was offset like that. So it was like this step down, and that wasn't supposed to happen. So that was completely my fault for rushing. So take your time. I don't suggest you sawing anything inside unless you want to scrub the whole place down, which I did. So I used a ton of wood filler, and that you'll see this picture has a ton of wood filler. I just piled it in there, filled in the gaps, and what I ended up doing was using 4 different grits of sandpaper. The reason I did this was because I needed to smooth out that step so that it was a smooth, it'll seem like one piece, not like this big old step, even though it wasn't that big, but it's dramatic enough where if you don't try to correct it, you're going to definitely feel it. So put a ton of wood filler, let it dry for a few days, and then just sand it, all the rough parts down with 80. If you get a lot of like little bumps, you want to maybe put another layer of wood filler, let that dry, and then go through again. Do an 80, then do a 120, and then you're going to really work those 2 sides. So the side that's higher, you're going to thin out that wood filler, and the side that's lower, you're going to leave that wood filler to mend that gap. Okay, so definitely 4 different types of grit helps the transition into the table, the flat part of the table. It'll be really smooth. It came out good. It looks horrible in the pictures, but then once I painted it, it came out great. I am using Valspar chalk paint. I did get it at a reduced price because someone didn't like it. I ended up loving it. It's like a gray tan looking color. And just make sure that you have the can turned over for at least 5 minutes prior to use, and then right before you use it, you're shaking it vigorously for a minute or 2. I just had a 3-inch paintbrush, and that's what I used. And just make sure you don't have too much excess on the brush as you're painting. Don't forget about the spindles and the leg. Using an 80 and a 120 grit sandpaper, go ahead and distress the table. Do it in places that would be commonly hit or bumped so that it looks like it happened over time and not like you just scuffed it up. So I wanted to do a whitewash on this table. I used Valspar chalk paint. All I did was get a clean paintbrush and put very, very little paint on it, and then just brushed it in the direction of the grain. And there's your whitewash. I gave the tabletop time to dry, and then I attached the legs prior to sealing. For the tabletop, I used polyacrylic. Now you don't want any bubbles in here, so you cannot shake the can, you have to stir it in the can. I then poured it into, after I stirred it, I poured it into a tub, used a clean 3-inch paintbrush and made sure there wasn't too much excess on the brush. Then I brushed it on the table in the direction of the grain. And since I wasn't really going for a smooth finish with the polyacrylic, I applied 4 coats, letting it dry for a few hours in between each coat. The reason you do the polyacrylic first before you do the antique waxing or the sealing wax is because you cannot get wax on and then apply polyacrylic. So after the polyacrylic's done, I did do the antique waxing. Now it stains very quickly, so as soon as you brush it on, you want to wipe it off. And if you want it darker, you keep doing that. Brush it on, wipe it off. Do not leave it too long. It gets muddy very quickly. I also applied the antique wax to the bottom gold spray painted feet. It gave it more of an aged look. After the antique wax dried for about an hour, I did apply the Valspar sealing wax. I do use a wax brush. Now, they do tell you you're supposed to wipe off excess wax. Now, if you don't put too much on, you don't have to wipe anything off. So I prefer not to wipe off because it just pulls up the paint, pulls up the antique wax. If I have it already the way I like it, I just apply the wax and let it sit. Okay, some tips. Make sure you don't forget the bottom of the table or the spindles. Make sure everything is clean before you apply your next coat of anything. Make sure it's dry before you apply your next coat of anything. Also, I did the polyacrylic on the top of the table because you're going to be wiping off the top of the table and you need something better than wax. Wax comes off. You're supposed to apply wax every 6 months, so you don't want to be doing that on the top of the table. Also, if you want to know how I spray painted the tips of the legs, check out my chair video, how I turned the chairs into stools, and I can show you better. So I hope the video inspired you to do something that you've been wanting to do around the house. This was terrifying for me, but I did it and you can do it too. So get to it and I will see you on my next video. Hopefully it'll be a sewing one by now, but I'm not sure. I've been definitely working on the house. So God bless, have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.